So the second way to collect primary data is using questionnaire data. As we can see here, this is where we had left last time, which is basically asking people, and we'll talk about idea generation methods and idea evaluation methods over there. So what is questionnaire data? It's the facts and figures obtained by asking people about their attitudes, awareness, intentions, and behaviors. You might have seen some questionnaires coming in on your in, and then you might have filled them up in the past. These are one type of questionnaires that we use to collect information from people. So for questionnaire data, we can have idea generation methods or idea evaluation methods. And in idea generation methods, we generally want to, we don't generally have an idea at all, or we have like a hint of the idea, but we don't know, we don't have that strong idea in our mind. And in order to get the idea stronger in our minds, get to know more about the idea that we have, we use individual interviews, which, as the name suggests, are the individual interviews that we conduct with consumers, or conducting interviews with people who are of our interest. Conduct these interviews with them individually and ask them about more about the idea that we have in our minds. Or the second way of generating ideas is conducting focus groups. In focus groups, generally we have, as this small picture over there shows, we generally have these moderators sitting in, like in this case, it's outside the room, and we have the participants sitting inside the room and discussing uh, about the content that we want them to discuss on. So, for example, you can give these people, you can have a group of people, and then these people have a topic to discuss on. You give them a topic, you just stand back, and then you as a moderator would just try to listen to what all of these guys are talking about, where the conversation is taken. About, of course, we are interested in generating an idea around something, around a seed that we have put in there, and we want them to discuss around that. So if they are distracted, if they're taking the conversation somewhere completely different, in a different direction, we want to bring them back, and we want to keep them in focus. So this focus group is basically where we try to generate more ideas by listening to what these 6 to 12 people is generally what a focus group is comprised of these people are talking about. So that's another way of idea generation. Next is the idea evaluation methods. When we have generated the idea, we have already probably implemented the idea, or we have not implemented the idea, but we have kind of just are in the finalization stages of the idea. We go for these idea evaluation methods in order to evaluate whether our idea is correct or not. So we can go for personal interview surveys. These are again like the interviews that we just talked about, the individual interviews. These are the same as that. We just conduct these surveys personally with individuals and ask them about the questions that are related to evaluation of the idea. We can also go for telephone surveys. We call these people and ask them on phone whether they liked whatever the idea, the service, or whatever the evaluation is about. Then we can also have online surveys and panels. These online surveys can be through email or internet, and panels, and again we are asking them to evaluate the idea kind of in using different questions. Now, the questions that we are talking about, these questions have specific formats that we want to follow, And these question formats are, we can have open-ended questions, and I'm talking about these questions on the questionnaires that you might have filled in the past, like the one we can see over here. There are some specific question formats that need to be there on that questionnaire. So we can have open-ended questions, which are basically the questions that do not have an option. These are not like multiple choice questions. These are basically just the questions, and the respondents are supposed to write an answer or type an answer to that question. They don't get any options to select from. However, the closed-ended or fixed alternative questions are the ones where the respondents get some choices, and the respondents need to choose from those choices or select one of those choices. For example, the one that we see highlighted on the picture here, it says on a scale of 1 to 5, would you rate your level of whatever the question is, but it gives them an option from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and the respondent is supposed to just select one of those options. So that's a closed-ended question where you're closing the question in a way that you're giving them fixed alternatives to select from. Now, to understand dichotomous questions, semantic differential questions, and Likert scale questions, I'm just going to go directly to the example of those. And this is uh, a, a sample Wendy's survey that we see here. So the first question that we see on there is, what things are most important to you when you decide to eat out at a fast food restaurant? So this type of a question where there are no options given in, this is an open-ended question. Rest all are closed-ended because they all have options that the respondent needs to select from. The second question, for example, that we see here is, have you eaten at a fast food restaurant in the past month? And then we have yes and no as the option choices. And because we have two choices, this is called a dichotomous question because it's di means two, and whenever we have two option choices, we call it a dichotomous type question. Now, the next question that we see in here, which says number 5, because I've just selected the questions that I wanted to show in here as an example. So question number 5 in there that we see there is, for each of the characteristics listed below, check the space on the scale that describes how you feel about Wendy's. Mark an X on only one of the 5 aspects of each characteristic listed. So there are these characteristics, doesn't matter what the line in there, what the statement about that says. Basically, in a semantic differential question, you need to have you need to have two um, opposite choices given to the respondents, and they are supposed to select or mark an X, as it says, on only one of those spaces that are provided in there. So for example, the first one is tasty and not tasty. These are supposed to be opposites of each other. Then you have clean and dirty, inexpensive and expensive, broad and narrow. So when you give those bipolar choices, when you give those opposite uh, options to the respondents, and they're supposed to check something in the middle, one of those options in the middle, that is, they can either choose to go towards tasty or they can choose to go towards non-tasty. Again, they can choose to go towards clean or they can choose to go towards dirty. Or in the middle, they can just choose the middle option that's available in there. That's called a semantic differential scale, the one with two extremely opposite adjectives that you provide to the respondents, out of which they have to select, towards which direction do they want to go to. Then the last one that we see here is a Likert scale question, wherein you get the statements. For example, adults like to take their families to fast food restaurants, and then the respondents are supposed to select out of strongly agree, agree, don't know, or it can be neither agree nor disagree, then disagree, and then strongly disagree. So these the agreement or disagreement type of questions are called Likert scale type questions. So these are the five: open-ended, dichotomous, semantic differential scale, Likert scale, and closed-ended scale type questions are the question formats that are generally used on a questionnaire. Now, there are some typical problems that can occur in wording questions in a questionnaire, and I've seen many questionnaires having those problems. So we want to discuss these six typical problems that can uh, occur in there, and we want to try to talk about these, and so that whenever you create a questionnaire in future, you don't make those mistakes. So the first problem is leading question, and we're going to just try to understand this using an example. For example, if a question on the questionnaire says, why do you like Wendy's fresh meat hamburgers better than those of competitors? That's a leading question. You're trying to say that the respondent likes Wendy's hamburgers better than any others. You're just trying to force that straight statement on the respondent by asking a question like that. So that's a leading question, and we want to avoid that on a questionnaire. The next is an ambiguous question. For example, do you eat at fast food restaurants regularly? Yes or no? So you are saying, do you eat at fast food restaurants regularly? Regularly can have different definitions for different people. Regularly for some can be every day. Regularly for some people can be once in a week. It can be once in a month for some people, or it can be, alternate days for some people. So what does really regularly mean is different for different people. So that's an ambiguous question. We don't want to ask a question like that. Then we have an unanswerable question, which is, what was the occasion for eating your first hamburger? It's an unanswerable question. You're not going to remember what was the first occasion for eating a particular um, a particular dish. So that's something that we do not want to answer. We would, if if at all we need an answer to that question, if at all, we can only get the approximate guesses that the respondent can make, and we really do not want that. We don't want the respondents to guess about a question. We want an appropriate answer. Next is two questions in one. We want to avoid that, uh, avoid asking two questions in just one question. For example, do you eat Wendy's hamburgers and chili? Is asking two questions in one. What if they do eat one of those and don't eat the other? Should they select yes, or should they select no? And that's why we don't want to we don't want to ask two questions in one. We can, whenever we see the word and in a question, in a in a question on the questionnaire, we should revise that. We should go back to that question and see if we really are asking just one question, or are we asking two questions in one. Next is non-exhaustive question. That's, where do you live? At home, in dormitory? And we're not giving them enough options to fill in here. So they have to select. If they have to select out of home and dormitory, they're just going to randomly select one, because we are trying to force them to select one and not giving them other options. What if they live in an apartment? What should they select at that time? So it's important to give an exhaustive list of options to the respondents, so that they can fill in, they have that option in there to fill in. And if you think that you have covered all the options, for example, you have written at home, you have written in dormitory, you have written in apartment, in a hotel, for example, and you think that you've covered all, but there can be there can be other options which you cannot think of, then just simply give an option at the end, other, and ask them to specify what that other is about. So that's a good way to create an exhaustive list of questions. The last one is non-mutually exclusive answers. That is, if you ask a question, what is your age, and you give them under 20, and then it's 20 to 40, which is fine, and then the last option is 40 and over. So you repeated the choice 40 in the second and the third option answers that you gave them. So what if somebody is 40 years old? Should they check 20 to 40 box, or should they check 40 and over box? And that's why we need to make sure that we have a mutually exclusive list of options for the respondents. So it should be under 20, then 20 to 40, then 41 and above, and so on. So this is what we need to make sure. We need to make sure that we don't have leading question, we don't have an ambiguous question, we don't have unanswerable question, we don't have two questions in one, we don't have a non-exhaustive list of questions, and we do not have non-mutually exclusive answers in the questionnaire. It's time for our activity 8. What you're supposed to do this in this activity is, for each of the survey questions that are shown below, you have 5 questions in there. I've just numbered them. Write the type of question. Remember that you're not supposed to answer these questions. This is a survey, and this is actually a combination of different surveys. I've just put it in there. It might not make any sense. The story might not make any sense, story of the survey, but it's just to use as an example. So never mind what the questions are about. What you're supposed to do in here is, you're just supposed to write, what type of question do you think these are? Are these open-ended questions? And you have to write this for each question individually. So you can write number 1 and just write your answer choice. So is it an open-ended, closed-ended, dichotomous, semantic differential scale, or Likert scale type question? And if you think that it fits into 2 categories, do that. Write both of them, both of the options that you think these are. So do that, and then let's move forward. The last way to collect primary data is other sources of data, and we're going to talk about these one by one. So other sources of data is, number 1 is social media, and we all know about this already. All the people that are on social media, somehow, somewhere, their data gets collected, and that can be used as a source of primary data collection. You can just collect data from social media that's available online. We also have panels and experiments that can be conducted. For example, Columbus, Ohio is called the America's Test Market, where all the experiments, not all the experiments, but a lot of experiments are conducted on people over there. And then, panels, discussions take place in there, and that's where the data is collected from. Then we also get overall information technology gives us a lot of data. Um, for example, the checkouts that you see on each retail store, you see those people checking out your products that you buy. This is getting collected somewhere. This data is getting collected because they are using software to see how many of the products are being sold every day, every hour, which hour is the best hour in the day, which months are the best months in a year for a particular product to be sold. So all of this data gets collected somewhere, and that somewhere is called a data warehouse. A data warehouse is a place where all of this data gets collected. Now, if you are a member of the retail chain, if you are a member of let's say Best Buy, then when you are swiping at the end with your card, with your membership card, or you're a member of Kroger, let's say, you swipe your card, or you tell them that you're a member, and then they beep it with the machine that they have. It adds all of your purchases with your card, so they know exactly who bought what and how many of the items did they buy. So that's a, a place where all of this data gets collected, and that's called data warehouse. Now, data mining is the extraction of hidden predictive information from large databases, that is, these data warehouses, to find statistical links between consumer purchasing patterns and marketing actions. So what is done in data mining is, uh, out of these large databases that companies have, they they try to extract some hidden predictive information from there. So as the picture shows in here, you see these people on the right trying to mine the data. What they are trying to do here is basically bring all that information in, and try to find some statistical links between the purchasing patterns of consumers and marketing actions. That is, if when we change, for example, when we change the price of a particular product from A to B, the sales of that product changed from X to Y. So those are kind of the statistical links that these data mining people try to find between purchasing patterns and marketing actions. Now, what are the advantages and disadvantages of primary data? The advantage, which is a very big advantage, even though it seems like there's just one advantage, but it's a very big advantage that it's more specific to the problem, and we should say it's the most specific to the problem. So if you collect a lot of secondary data, which is of course not going to be specific to your problem, it's going to be specific to their problem. That's the people who collected it firsthand. The primary data gives you the most specific information related to your problem that you can have. So that's a very big advantage that primary data has. Now, the disadvantages of primary data is that it's expensive, because you need to either spend money on data collection, or you need to spend money to get these people to fill in your surveys, or for the interviews. Basically, you need to spend some money and time to collect data from people for primary data collection. Now, the next step in our 5-step marketing research process is develop findings. That's the step number 4. We analyze the data and present the findings in this step. Analyzing data means, for example, if we're doing it for Tony's Pizza, the analysis of data would include how our sales. Another analysis can include what factors contribute to sales trends. So once you analyze that data, you present the findings as, for example, like that. So you have that it's the marketing dashboard for Tony's Pizza. You have this A, B, C, and D. You have annual sales in A. You have average annual sales per household in B. You have it by household size in C. You have it by age of children in the household as D. So this is kind of an example of how data is analyzed and presented to the marketing manager, so that they can go for their step number 5, which is take marketing actions. Now, taking marketing actions means you make action recommendations based on the findings that you saw, the marketing dashboard that you saw. You make action recommendations based on that. Once you've made the recommendations, you implement those recommendations. So you go ahead and implement those recommendations. Once you have done that, you have to evaluate the results. You have to evaluate the results of the recommendations itself or of the decision itself. And you also have to evaluate the results of the decision process that was used. So you evaluate whether you did what you did, whether you did it right or not, and in the way you did it, the process that you followed, was that the right process to go with or not? And that completes our 5-step process of marketing research, starting off with defining the problem, then developing the research plan, collecting relevant information, developing findings, and taking marketing actions. And that completes our chapter. We learned about reasons for conducting marketing research. We talked about 5-step marketing research process, in which we talked about secondary and primary data. We talked about observations, questionnaires, and experiments. We also talked about information technology and data mining.